getting ready to stream and
Who knew I was going to beat before it came?
All right, looks like it's 6 o'clock. So we'll go ahead and call the regular Board of Education meeting for July for USD 417 to order. Looks like the first thing on our agenda is to elect the president of the Board of Education.
Mr. President, I nominate Terry Powell.
Second.
Others?
Second.
All right, so moved. I don't know, how do we need to vote on that? Both of those things or just? So voting for the president nomination has been myself. Thank you for your support, confidence, I guess. All in favor, raise your right hand. All opposed? Adam, is that a yay for you?
That's a yes vote.
All right. Again, thank you for your confidence. Introductions, looks like we all know each other. Consent agenda, fairly long. So I'll try to quickly go through this. Approval of the agenda, approved minutes, previous meetings, financial report, pay bills, donations, gifts, approved 2021 KSB policy updates. Some Flint Hills Special Ed Cooperative agreements presented. The Board of Education appointments, the 2021-2022 resolutions and regulations, board actions for fiscal year 2022, approve the employment of emergency sub teachers for 21-22, approval of the after school activity bus stops, approve the 21-22 mileage reimbursement rate of 56 cents, approval of the USD 417 credit cards, and the 417 wellness policies for elementary, middle school, and high school policies. Personnel employment, Ashley Snyder, Prairie Heights Elementary School halftime aide ASP director, Wendy Dietrich, CGES preschool and after or ASP aide, Braden Reddick, junior high assistant football coach, Keely Reddick, Brave co-sponsor. Resignations, Brady Gilliam, elementary school teacher's aide interventionist, Corey Diltz, CGES 7-hour cook, Linda Krause, CGES ASP aide. Kelly McDiffett, Council Grove Junior Senior High School principal.
Skip that.
I
already
tried.
told him we were going to take it off.
Anything there anybody would like to see removed from the consent agenda? Or have questions about?
Mr. President, it is with a heavy heart that I move we approve the consent agenda.
Moved and seconded that we approve the consent agenda. Discussion on that item. All in favor, raise your right hand. All opposed? Spotlight on education. Somebody want to say something there?
Yeah, we wanted to recognize all of our participants that qualified for the state playoffs this year in one form or another. And so we have listed on here all of the athletes and students through our organizations who participated in a state competition or national through FFA and FBLA. So we just want to congratulate them and thank them for being good representatives of our district and the hard work they put in to make it to that level. It's a lot of commitment, hard work, academically and physically, for them to be able to attend school and keep the grades and still be able to be at that level and attend those events. So thank you to them and our coaches and our sponsors, because without them, they wouldn't be able to get those kids to that point. They wouldn't have the opportunity to get to them. So we're very fortunate. We've got a great group. So congratulations to all the kids and the parents for their support for those kids. There's a lot of miles they put on their cars, a lot of money they spend to support those kids and our students. So we thank them as well.
So anybody else want to add to that?
That was.
I can. Cross country was Cody Downs and Jordan Picolette. Wrestling, Wyatt Johnson, Tom Van Valkenburg, Abby Allen, Casey McDiffett, Haven Thornhill, and Jolie Ziegler. Track, Hayden Beeling, Cody Downs, Jordan Picolette, Ethan Burton, Chase Goodman, Cale Jones, and Ahmad, I always say his last name wrong. Mansoray, they get close. FFA, Carissa Dahlquist. FBLA, Carissa Dahlquist, Miles Gant, Ella Kirk, Cal Unruh, Jordan Picolette, Allie Howard, and Claire Banks, who is also a state officer. So again, congratulations to them and thank you for being good representatives of our district. Reports. Mr. McDiffett, you're here. You have anything to throw in? Nope. Bryce? Aaron?
Just a couple things real quick. Just want to say thank you, Ms. McDippett. Obviously, we'll do something more formal as the year goes on, but just want to tell him thank you. Been a pretty integral part of our team here. I can't imagine what it's like here for the last 40 years. So thank you for my last 3 years. It's been a pleasure to get to work with them. Looking forward to the fourth and final year here. Lights are done down there. Just want to give you a heads up because you'll probably get some calls from people like, why the lights still on the football field? So as soon as we get those programs turned on at night, just tell them that's just part of the, the security down there and for the community. They can go down there and walk at night. It'll be lit up enough so it'll be safe for them to walk. So, but you'll probably get some people wondering why it's lit up down there because it's pretty bright. But thanks to LEDs, it's only about 1,000 watts of power compared to 20,000 within a couple years ago. So it won't cost a lot of electricity to light that up down there. And then I also wanted to get the pulse from the board. We do have some out of district requests for students with transportation. It's mainly to the north of us, and we already go out of district to the east of us. We already go out of district to the north a little bit, and this would probably be about 8 miles or so. We do have to by law notify those districts that we're doing it, but the law has changed since the transportation law used to be if you were within 10 miles of your district, you couldn't do it, and now it's 2.5 miles and hopefully you can transport. It used to be by mutual consent. Now it's just you can do it only with notification. So we do have the opportunity. I think it would behoove us to do that with a bus route to probably be around 6 kids or so. We can send Virgil over now that he is retiring. We still often drive her out. We can send him over in a van, pick up the kids. It costs us very little compared to the game. Plus, some of those kids already come here. They just won't be able to continue to come here unless they have transportation. Because last year during the pandemic, they had older kids that lived around them that were driving them to meet the bus. Those kids are now back in school. They were remote before in their area. They're back in school so they can. So we'll lose some of the kids. Plus, we can pick up probably about 4 more new kids on top of that by going with the transport. So we don't have, you don't have to make a motion on it. By law, you don't. I just want to get calls to make sure everybody's okay with that. We have been visiting with parents, and I think it's time to start doing those things. Hate to do that sometimes and send buses into your neighboring district, but at the same time, those kids are making choice and we're not recruiting them by any means. We're just going to request it for that. Is that okay with everybody? Get the pulse of everybody on that. Okay. Very good. That's all I got.
And I know that you guys talked, or just a quick question, I guess. Last time we met, I think you guys were getting ready to interview special ed.
Yeah.
Did we find somebody for that?
So I think, yes, we did. They have accepted the position. He will start on the 19th, a half day. I think we got a really good candidate. The first kind of been a journey. So our first 2 turned us down. I don't even know why they applied. I don't think they had intention of taking it because they weren't ready to move from where they were at. Both have to relocate. Christopher is the gentleman who took the position. He's currently in. Gosh, you should probably go there. I don't know what district he's coming from, but he'll bring a lot of good experience in special ed work to us. He's been a special ed teacher, has personal experience with students with special needs, so I think that we get fit for us. We're excited to be on board. Yeah, we do have that position to it.
Okay. Anybody else have questions? Anybody?
Yeah. So, you I personally think people determine what you value perception by what you invest in, right? And while we just spent a lot of money in our football field down there, I don't want people to think that's what we value most. The sports are important to us, but it's not what we value. And for years, I've been wanting to do something like this here since I've been here, just haven't had the time to do it. So Amanda, our art teacher, I asked her to send me some student artwork, and these were all pencil drawings and chalk drawings from kids in high school. And so I just scanned them in and sent them to Walmart and blew them up as pictures, and they turned out really well. So my plan is we'll change these out, every year or so, and I'll give either the kids the artwork if they want it, or give them the man paint in the classroom or throughout the high school, something like that. So we can keep changing them out and keep displaying new works and expand them in other places in the district too. Because got some phenomenal artists as well. Really neat stuff. So it's nice to display their work, let it be seen, celebrate that as well in the fine arts.
Board members have anything? All right. Moving right along then to action items, election of the USD 417 board vice president.
President, I nominate Tina Ray.
Seconded. Well, let me slow down. Any other nominations? Seconded that Tina Ray be the vice president. Any discussion on that item? All in favor, raise your right hand. All opposed? So passed. All right, House Bill 2104, about to 2014. 2104, changes in the budget process.
Officially, I guess it is Senate Bill 13, so it's changed names so many times. So here's a little, I put together this afternoon, kind of an explanation of what's going on. So I put it up here on the screens for those that are watching at home to read it as well. But, and I'll read this, I'll kind of paraphrase some of it, I'm reading word for word to you, but in the past, so what this document is trying to explain the differences in what we're going to be doing here moving forward versus where we've been in the past in the budget process. So, in the past, it was a pretty simple process to do. We completed the budget, we brought that to the Board of Education. You have the authority to make accept it as it is, make adjustments in it, and ultimately we publish that in the paper. We have a budget hearing. Those who either support it or oppose it come and speak to that. We have the opportunity to adjust it again, and we send it to the county clerk to be certified August 25th. Pretty simple process to do, and we got it done, and issues on for the most part from year to year. Now with Senate Bill 13 or the House Bill 2104, the goal of this bill, because I get a lot of questions from people, what is the purpose of this bill? Because there really is no purpose for school systems. But the goal of the bill, as you can read here, was to replace the current tax lids that the counties and cities had when the new legislation was passed a few years ago that put tax lids on municipalities. They couldn't raise revenue past a certain point, and then they were frozen. That's why we had to have all of our funds that were being held due to the city and Lake lawsuit going on. That's why we had to have those returned to us 2 years ago, because the county coffers got so large holding those funds that they couldn't generate the revenue to fund their own budget because they had too much in their cash balances because they were holding our funds and other tax funds as well. So that had to be refunded to us, which we'll go into that here in a little bit. That's going to create some rolling trickle problems that are going to be very difficult to address in the future if we don't get that resolved pretty quickly. That's a whole other issue. So that's what Senate Bill 13 was designed to do, was to remove the tax lids for municipalities and taxing authorities that had that tax lid, so they could generate funds to do whatever their local goals and cultures was that they wanted to do in their communities that they weren't able to do before. Well, so and then schools were not included in this bill until it got to the House, and then unfortunately there's a negative climate with some of that going on legislatively, we all know, and it was decided to include schools into this bill as well then. So that's how schools got added to it, and this was a lack of understanding amongst many of our legislatures in school finance. It just got added and went through the process. And speaking with a lot of legislatures and asking them why they felt schools need to be in this, the general response was, I don't know. So explain to them that schools are already capped. We're controlled. We can only do 33% in our LOB. 20 mils is by statute for the general fund for the state. And we're going to go through all this here, but school finance, we're already regulated by statute. We don't have the authority to go rogue. We can only go 8 mils on our capital outlay. We can't go 20 if you wanted to. You don't have the ability to do that as a board. So there's really no reason for schools to be in this. But we are, so we got to move forward and make the best of it and deal with it. So what will happen this year with the new legislation is we have to turn in our mill rates, and that's the purpose of tonight, to our county clerk by July 20th. So let's kind of go through this and I'll explain it as we go. So I'm not jumping ahead. So as a school district, kind of a real quick school finance. Oh, Joy, can you do it on my computer? Sorry. You minimize that screen so you can see all the words, not this whole screen, but Zoom screen, tip in the left-hand corner, little.
Let's see if I can.
Zoom with.
I can't get mine.
Everybody
Maybe.
good, okay? Okay, you're good. Don't worry about it.
You're welcome.
Yeah. So school districts were authorized to levy property taxes for selected funds, right? We have 3 revenue sources and really 4 if you count bond and interest. So we have our general fund, we have our supplemental general fund, we have our capital outlay fund, and we have a bond and interest fund. So we levy taxes just like everybody else based on a person's assessed valuation of their home. So what that means is, and there's a little example paragraph you can read, but I'll explain it with this chart. So everybody, it's usually very typical for people to get assessed valuation and appraised value confused. So appraised value is what the market value of your home is worth. So if you wanted to sell your home and put it on the market, that would be the appraised value. So in this example, we have a $200,000 house, a house that's appraised $200,000 by the county appraiser. The first $20,000 of everybody's home is exempt in our general fund. So that's why you'll see on your county appraiser sheet that $20,000 deduction in your assessed and your appraised value, and then they multiply that by 11.5%, and that's how we come up with the assessed valuation. So residential property is assessed at 11.5%. Commercial property is assessed at a different percent. Agricultural property is assessed at a different percent, determined based on whether it's crop ground or tillable ground or grassland or whatnot on the production value and so forth. So there's a different factors that land and properties assessed at, but for residential homes, it's assessed at 11.5%. So you take your appraised value, you multiply it by the 11.5%, and that's where we come up in that next column, you get the assessed valuation. So your assessed valuation for our general fund, you'll notice is less, in this example, $20,700 than our other funds, which would be supplemental general fund, capital outlay, and bond and interest. So those are assessed at the full appraised value. So on a $200,000 home, they get the 11.5% applied to $200,000 because the $20,000 is not exempt as it is with general fund dollars. So that's how we come up with these numbers. And then what you do is you take the, close this out. See that last time.
Real quick before you get to that, just to make sure we understand, that 20,000 is a base dollar figure. It's not 10% of the 200,000.
Right. The 20,000, that doesn't matter. Your home is valued as appraised at 100,000, 200,000, or 500,000. You're just 20,000 is exempt. Good. Yeah, good question. And so then a mill rate is 1/1000 of your assessed valuation. So in this example, you would take $20,700 for our general fund, and you would divide that by 1,000, and then multiply it by 20, or multiply it by 0.2, whichever way you want to do the same math. And that's how you come up with your taxing rate for that general fund. So in this example, a $200,000 house, and these are based on our last year's mills. We levied 20 mills in general fund by statute. So a $200,000 home would pay $414 of property tax for a general fund. That money goes to the state. So that's what funds our FTE, and we'll get to that here in a minute as well. Then local funds, what we levy locally and what stay local here are our next 3 funds, our supplemental general fund, our capital outlay, and our bond and interest. So in this example, on a $200,000 home, the assessed valuations for these funds are $23,000. So you divide that by 1,000, and you take the $23 times 19.03 mils, and that person would pay $437.69 in taxes for our supplemental general fund. And you do the same process for capital outlay. We levy 8 mills. That's our max that we can levy. We levy 8 mills last year and proposing again for this year. Take the 23,000, divide by 1,000, multiply that by 8, you come up with $184. And then finally in bond and interest, And that mill rate changes every year based on assessed valuation because we have to pay our bonds. We have to pay those funds back. So last year we levied 11.578. That comes out to be $266.29. So this person, in this example, who owned a $200,000 home would have paid just a little over $1,300 in taxes, in school taxes for property tax. Okay, so that's how taxes are levied for the school district. Now, if you get down into the specifics on the fund, there's a lot of things that are important to know, especially from a taxpayer standpoint. We get what's called state aid. It's based on lower than average property valuations in each school district. So in the general fund, it's important to point out that, remember, we levied 20 mills. That's a state statute. Every school district in the state levies 20 mills in general fund dollars. And that money goes straight to the state of Kansas. It does not stay here locally. That goes to the state of Kansas. And that's what creates the education fund in the state of Kansas, that the state then turns around and pays school districts based on our full-time equivalency, our FTE. And that's the budget that we're doing right now. And so if you'll notice in here, last year, our 20 mills locally raised $1,212,521. That's that number right there. But we received in our general fund an additional $5.8 million. So from state aid, state equity aid. So in essence, then the important number ratio, remember right here, is for every dollar that we raise locally in tax dollars for our general fund based on those 20 mills, we received $4.82 in tax dollars. So that means people from other communities are paying over 4 times the price of our education for our kids than our local taxpayers are in the general fund. That makes sense? Yeah. So that often gets overlooked. So I think that's important to remember when it comes to general fund. Now, none of that money stays local. That all goes to the state of Kansas. That's just strictly, we don't even get that in our coffers. The state, our county clerk sends that straight to the state of Kansas. Local funds that stay here local are these three: our supplemental general fund, or sometimes it's referred to as local option budget, or LOB. So in this fund, we do the same. We can levy up to 33% by law of the general fund. So if our general fund is $7 million, we can levy 33% of that $7 million to raise locally to supplement our general fund budget. And that's what we do here. We do levy 33%. We have in the past, and we'll propose to do that again this year. So we're maxed out. And for there also is an equalization aid in this fund as well. So if you read down through here, this last year, this coming year, our state aid will be 38 cents and 38.56 cents on the dollar for every dollar raised here locally. So that means that for basically in our LOB fund, if we levy $1 million, then our local taxpayers are really only paying about 61.5% of that. Other taxpayers in the state are paying 38.5% of that. So again, it's not all 100% generated by local dollars. There's a state aid match on that. And that varies by district. Poor districts will have a higher match, and more wealthier property value districts will have a lower match. So for instance, just as a reference point, when I was in Northline County, when they put the gas plant or the electric plant in, we lost all state aid because we became a wealthy valuation per pupil district because the electric plant paid a lot of the tax dollars in because they were such a big evaluation. So that's the table and how that works. So we're on the lower end of that because we receive a lower amount of state aid and those districts, which is not a bad problem to have. But that means we have a more wealthy property value district than some. So not a bad problem. Capital outlay, same thing. There is an equalization fund in that as well from the state of Kansas. Last year we received 25 cents on the dollar. So that means our local patrons, we levied 8 mills, and that came out to be, I think, a little over $600,000. That means for every dollar raised, our local patron only paid 75 cents of that dollar. 25% came from other taxpayers in the state of Kansas. This year it is going down. We'll be at 23 cents this year in equalization aid. So it will go down some. And same thing in bond and interest. Our local state aid, our local match was 25% again in bond and interest. This year it'll go down to 23% as well. So obviously that capital outlay and bond and interest come off the same table, figuring that property valuation. So now that's the old way. Now with Senate Bill 13, with the revenue neutral rate, or R&R, as you'll see referred to, what happens now is the county clerk has to certify to us what our revenue neutral rate is. And so she'll give us this form, and I have a copy of the finalized form. I'll be here in a second. But what all that does is what they do is they take the actual taxes we levied last year, they divide it by our new assessed valuation and come up with a mill rate. And that's what's called our revenue neutral mill rate. So the irony of this is, by law, we have to levy 20 mills to the state of Kansas for general fund, right? Our revenue neutral rate for general fund is 19.2 mills. So the law violates the law, if that makes sense. So again, that's why schools weren't designed to be part of this. But we are, so we just got to figure it out. It's been very confusing, and hats off to our county clerk. She's done an amazing job with this as well. It's very confusing with clerks as well. She's taking the best of it as well and doing a great job in helping us out. So we will exceed revenue neutral rates in every fund. The only way you will not as a district is if you have a decrease in your evaluation. So that means if your property values are going the wrong way, are decreasing in value versus increasing, or if you had a large corporation became exempt. So for instance, a few years ago, remember when LLCs were exempt from taxes. So if you had $1 million concrete plant or an oil or gas plant in your district and had several hundred million in the valuation and they went exempt, all of a sudden your assessed valuation is going to drop drastically. So that's not a good thing. That means your local taxpayer is going to have to pick up the difference, and your mill rates are going to go through the roof. So you want a steady increase or maintain neutral or a steady increase to keep taxes flat or minimal increases throughout inflation for the rest of the time. And that's what's happening in Morris County. We're going in the right direction. Our assessed valuation increased. I think it went from about 67 million, about 69 million. When we do budget, I'll have exact numbers for you when we go through the budget process, but that's kind of the estimate we're looking at right now. So what here's how it came out to be when you shake down that math. In general fund, our revenue was 20 mills last year. Revenue neutral was 19.288. Supplemental, we levied 19.03 mills last year. Our revenue neutral rate is 18.425. Capital outlay, we levied 7.745, and bond and interest levied 11.548. 11.21 is what our revenue neutral rate is. So tonight's process, what we have to do then, according to the new law, is we have to let the county clerk know. And this is what the rest of this is. Here's kind of a timeline here. So before we look at this new sheet, we'll finish this one real quick. So that last paragraph I put up there, it's just virtually impossible to stay revenue neutral in all funds for multiple reasons. One, inflation, salary increases, increased expenses of software, utilities, and so forth, for example, requires additional revenue this year, every year. So it's impossible, and by statute, we have to levy 20 mills for the state. So if we want to give raises to our employees, if we want to pay our utility bills that go up 10 to 20% every year, if we want to continue our subscriptions to licensing and software fees for our curriculum that go up every year, there's no way you can stay revenue neutral. Inflation is inflation, it's just the way it works. And so the timeline, June 15th, we have to have we got our assessed valuation estimates from the county clerk. So we do have those. July 20th, which is coming up, with the purpose of the meeting tonight, and this part of the agenda, we have to let the county clerk know what our proposed mill rate will be if we are exceeding the revenue neutral rate, which we know we will be. So you're not tied to it though. You're not bound to that. We can always go down from that when we get to the budget process in August, but you can't go above it. It's the ceiling. So what we turn into her for the 20th is the ceiling for what we can levy in taxes. So you got to be really close. And that's what's been the problem in school districts this year is the timeline and the turnaround this is nearly impossible because you can't even really get the year closed out. And you have to know what your cash balances are before you can even start next year's budget. And here's why that is. So for instance, in our local option budget or supplemental general fund budget, whatever you have in cash carryover is a tax credit towards next year's taxes. So we had the issue last year of the big refund from the county that I spoke about earlier, right? As far as because they were holding the funds due to the lake lawsuit. Well, they had to refund those to us. That case is still not settled, right? So those went into our funds, but you don't get to spend. You can't go back and retroactively spend tax dollars in our local option budget. Once that year is over, you lose all authority to spend that dollar. So it just becomes a credit towards next year's taxes that you're going to levy. So not only do you lose it the year they kept it, you lose it in your budget authority moving forward. So let's just say they kept $100,000 in LOB funds in a year. That really becomes $200,000 to us as a school district. And if we had to repay it, now it's $300,000. So that 100,000 that was withheld in 1 year really becomes 200,000 the next budget year, and it comes 300,000 if we have to pay it back. So that's why it's so important we get to a resolution on this so we can move forward and know, because we have an obligation to prepay our bonds. They don't, our bond carriers don't care what's going on here locally, they just want their money. And so that's where those funds are. Now we are building up a pretty good cash balance in our bond and interest that we'll use that to either pay back the bond and interest piece if we lose or pay off our bonds early, saving our taxpayers some significant dollar interest. But with LOB funds, the capital outlay funds, it's a different story. We lose that state aid and we don't get to carry that credit forward in an LOB. So this year we had $400-some thousand preliminarily left over in our LOB fund because of that balance. We don't have the authority to spend that. We only get the budget authority for what we publish. And then what our head count is based on September 20th. That's why September 20th is such an important date. So we had that cash carryover. We'll have a little over $400,000. That brings our mill rates way down in our LOB. And that's a credit moving forward to our patrons. So we'll offset that in our bond and interest to raise more bond and interest funds, keeping the mill rates flat overall, but yet raise more funds in bond and interest to pay that off sooner, so we can lower the interest rate, save our taxpayers some significant dollars down the road. So hopefully it will work out even. That's kind of the mindset how I'm doing the budget moving forward. But we'll go cover all that for different nights in August on our next August program. We're not there yet for that. So that's what August 20th. Now, the new timeline is, if you remember the old timeline, we had to have it certified to the county clerk by August 25th. Now we have from August 20th until September 20th to hold our hearings, because we have to have two hearings. One for going above our revenue neutral rate, and then our traditional budget hearing. We can do them at the same time, though. That's the nice thing. We still don't have, we can have one first and then have the second one right after. So that won't be a big deal. Still have to give 10 days public notice for publication. All that stays the same. So we will meet, the timeline I put down here is the question mark. August 9th, we'll present the budget to you. You'll approve it for publication at that time. We'll publish it size of the paper. 10 days, we'll set our hearing that night. So basically August 9th, that's why I put the question marks there. We'll set our hearing date together on August 9th. That's what we'll publish in the paper then. So I haven't done that now. You'll see some districts they're doing that, because you have the option if you read up here to tell the county clerk now when your hearing is going to be, but by law you don't have to. So we just chose not to do that, because technically you don't even have to approve this resolution until August 20th. But we know we're going above budget revenue neutral, so let's just get out of the way and do it now. There's no sense of waiting until August 20th. Now, the caveat will be, we have to get really good at this. Is August 9th the right date? I think that's our August 20th. Okay. The caveat will be this year, our proposed ceiling rate will not get published. But next year, the county clerk by law has to send an individual letter to each taxpayer saying what the proposed mill rate is going to be that's above revenue neutral. So you don't want to pad it too much, because you don't want to inflate it. People go, oh, we're raising taxes significantly, but you don't want to underestimate, because then you don't have the authority to generate the funds you need to operate. So it's really a tightrope walk, and you got to be really accurate. And that's the problem. Budget is not budget. So what we do right now is just estimating for authority, and we always estimate high. Our true budget comes in September. Well, after enrollment, we'll get a better projection. So we'll look at our head count after our enrollment, and in August we'll go, okay, hey, we're above where we thought we were going to be. We know we can increase some of our budget numbers, or our numbers didn't hit where we thought we were going to be. We're going to have to cut some of our budget numbers. And then our true budget comes in September 20th, count date. That's when we have our audit. That's the numbers go to the state, and they audit us off that to get our final numbers for what's called budget authority. Well, if we projected we were going to have, let's say, 850 kids, and we thought we were going to have a $9 million budget, but we only ended up with 700 kids, and we only have a $6.5 million budget, then no problem. We had the $9 million budget authority, right? Let's say we did it the other way around, and we only predicted we'd have 700 kids, we ended up with 900 kids. We can't spend $9 million because we don't have the budget authority to do that, because you have to have the authority for the taxpayers to spend their dollars. So that's why we always estimate high this time of year, and that way we don't have to republish down the road, which is a real pain to do and a lot of work. So that's kind of the process right now. Really, right now, we're just estimating funds and getting authority from our taxpayers to spend those funds. The real budgeting will have to happen after our enrollment date and after September 20th. So if you look at this sheet then, which squint really hard, but I'll blow it up with here, prints off really small. So all this does, it just actually shows everything we talked about. It talks about the actual taxes levied last year. So in general fund, we actually levied $1.2 million locally, even though we received $7 million from the state. That's that offset state aid we talked about. Locally, 20 mills generated $1.2 million. Our revenue neutral rate is 19.288 mills. We're still going to levy 20 because that's the law. So that's what this number is over here. So this is what we're going to levy. This is the proposed tax rate for this year. We know we have to levy 20. We'll put it in there because that's the statute. So that'll generate $1,257 based on this preliminary assessed valuation we have from the county. But that's important to remember too, that can change throughout the year because we have delinquent taxes. People don't pay their taxes sometimes. We have neighborhood revitalization plans that have tax exempt portions of it. And then we have tax in process, it's called, because we're on a different fiscal year, right? Than when people pay their taxes. And so there's a 6-month window of tax in process. So all that, it's like an ebb and flow process. Our evaluation can change drastically. Well, it just depends on the climate and environment, what can happen, but your evaluation can have potential change throughout the school year. So it can get pretty complicated, but based on what we have right now from the county clerk on our assessed valuations, this is what we'll levy, that's what it'll generate. This is what we levied last year, that's what it generated. So they take their actual taxes levied, divided by 20, and that's how they came up with our new assessed valuation. That's how they came up with 19.288. So we're already going to have to publish and be above revenue neutral just because of that fund by itself. The next line down in capital outlay, we levied just a little over $500,000 last year, took 8 mills to do that. Now, in order to generate those same dollars, it would only take 7.745 mills. So we still are proposing to levy 8, which is a difference of about $13,000, just shy of $13,000. Again, that's inflation. It's just the cost every year of goods and services going up. And then supplemental general fund, we levied almost 1.3 million, took 19.033 mills to do it. To generate that same amount of dollars that we have, well, and this is where it gets a little complicated because it averages it out, but we have a cap of 30.630 mills. Our revenue neutral rate is 29 for other funds. So we're going to propose that we levy 14.258 in our LOB. And this is where it's important to be able to explain, look at the big difference between these two numbers, 5 mills, right, almost. And that is that cash carryover we had in our LOB taxing authority because of the refund from the county. So we have $400,000 sitting there that we can't spend. So that becomes a tax credit towards the next year. So instead of levying $1.3 million, we're only going to levy $989,000 because there's already money sitting there that taxpayers paid this year. They don't have to pay it next year. So that's why this mill rate went way down. So to offset that, we have 2 choices. We could just leave it and then tax a lower mill rate next year, or we can offset that in our bond and interest. So you'll notice last year we levied 11.5 mills, which generated $784,000 in bond and interest. We could do that again and make our bond payment, or we can offset the difference, which is what you'll see I proposed here at 16.37 mills, and it'll generate 1.1 million. It'll be the same mill rate for our patrons, so they won't see an increase in the mill rate, but we'll generate significant more funds in our bond and interest. We can pay that off sooner, saving significant interest in that bond account. So it'll be a tax savings to our patrons in the next 3 years. Because instead of paying 5 or 6 more years on that, we probably pay it off in the next 3 years. So it'll be a significant savings, several $100,000 in savings for our taxpayers in interest rates on that bond. So, and that's what we did this year. We did that same thing this year because we had that same issue this fiscal year, this past school's fiscal year, because of the refund from the county in those funds. So that brings us down here to our total. Our revenue neutral rate for other funds is 29.6. Last year we were 30.613. This year we're proposing to be 30.63 again. So basically it's flat. And we can make that exact just by playing with the cash balance in our revenue fund for bond and interest. But I finish this up about 4:30 today. I'll just leave it fine for this because you can always do that. So that's what we have to certify. This is what to vote on tonight. And if you all decide that this is what, okay, we'll send this to the county clerk. This becomes our ceiling. You can't go above any of that. But you can always come back and go, you know what? Let's not levy 16 mils of bond interest, let's just do 15. You have the authority to go down. You just can't go up past that rate. That makes sense? Long explanation.
Thoughts or questions? So right now, what you need from us is a motion to approve the exceeding of the revenue neutral.
Correct. And then there's actually a resolution in your packet. So you'll approve the resolution, that'll be first. And then you'll approve these mill rates to be turned into the county clerk. So you'll be two processes. First motion is the resolution to exceed revenue neutral rate. Second motion is approving these numbers to turn into the county clerk.
Mr. President, I move we approve the following resolution. Resolution revenue neutral resolution, a resolution expressing the property taxation policy of the Unified School District 417, Morris County, Kansas, with respect to exceeding the revenue neutral tax rate for financing the annual budget for 2021-2022. Whereas 2021 Senate Bill 13 and Senate Sub for House Bill 2104 provides that a levy of property taxes to finance the 2021-2022 budget of the Unified School District 417 exceeds the revenue neutral tax rate to finance the 2021-2022 budget of the Unified School District 417 be authorized by a resolution. Therefore, be it resolved by the Board of Education of Unified School District 417 that the 2021-2022 budget with a levy of property taxes exceeding the revenue neutral tax rates calculated for the 2021-2022 as adjusted pursuant to the 2021 Senate Bill 13 and Senate Sub for House Bill 2104 is hereby adopted by the Board of Education on this date.
Well done.
That was a lot.
Second,
I will second.
all right, moved and seconded that we pass that resolution. I'm not going through it all.
No.
Discussion on that item. All in favor, raise your right hand. All opposed?
Mr. President,
Before you do that, are you doing this?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I looked at your screen. My bad.
All right. Aaron, on your screen, this showed that this was just the Form 99. Do you want it as the Form 99 or does it have to go as, it doesn't have a form number on it?
Right, so it is code 99, but it's the revenue neutral tab of code 99 that goes to county clerk. So that's it's different this year than what you've been used to in years past.
Mr. President, I move we approve the revenue neutral tax rate tab for Form 99 for the 2021-2022 school year.
Moved and seconded that we approve the Form 99
Revenue neutral.
exceeding the revenue tab
Um,
as presented. Discussion on that item. All in favor, raise your right hand. All opposed? All right. Now it looks like we're going to need an executive session.
So you need one for non-elected personnel and one for a student. You can do them both in the same one, but that's the reason.
How long do you think we need?
10 minutes.
Anybody else?
And
Mr. President, I move we go into an executive session to discuss an individual employee's performance pursuant to non-elected personnel under COMA. And in addition, to discuss confidential student information pursuant to the exemption relating to actions adversely or favorably affecting a student under COMA for 10 minutes with Mr. W and the board.
Moved and seconded, we have a 10-minute executive session for non-elected personnel and student stuff as stated. Discussion on that item. All in favor, raise your hand. All opposed?